scripture reading this morning comes from the second letter of Paul to the Corinthians, a reading from the 4th chapter, verses 7 through 10. But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come to us or from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. This weekend, our society celebrates Mother's Day, a time to recognize the love and sacrifice and dedication that mothers make on behalf of their children and their families. Many people look forward to Mother's Day or Father's Day later in June as a joyful time to celebrate and thank their mothers and their fathers. And yet several years ago, a woman confided to me that she dreaded Mother's Day each spring. This woman was the mother of 2 high-achieving children, and she had a wonderful, loving husband and a great job. And yet she said to me, when you look at what's written on those Mother's Day cards, we build mothers up and put them on a pedestal as though we are perfect mothers. But, she continued, I don't feel like I'm a perfect mom. It's not that I feel like I'm a bad mom either. I guess I feel like I'm just an okay mom. And then with a grin on her face, she said, I suppose I'm the world's okayest mom. To illustrate her point, consider the opening lines from this poem entitled A Perfect Mother. Since the moment I entered this world, you have cared for me like no other. There is only one word to describe you, that is, in every way, a perfect mother. But most parents are completely honest with ourselves. However, I think that most of us must admit that we are far from being perfect mothers or perfect fathers, described in this opening line and similar verses in all of those cards from Hallmark. In many ways, parents feel inadequate and mistake-prone much of the time. In fact, I believe that moms and dads face at least 3 critical challenges when it comes to parenting today. The first challenge is that social media has transformed the world of children and youth since we parents were children and youth ourselves. The social world which parents experienced when they were children and youth no longer exists. Instead, it has been replaced by a far different world, a world which is faster and in many ways harsher than what I experienced growing up. Parents of children and youth are raising the first ever digital generation. A generation of sons and daughters who since birth have had access to smartphones and other forms of digital technology. Even the most diligent and dedicated parents cannot control everything that their youth encounter in the digital world, including sexually explicit messages and images, violence, and bullying. As one parent said to me over a year ago, Richard, I can't control what my kids are encountering through digital material. I can't know for sure that they're not being bullied. I can't be certain whether they're truly happy or depressed. My only hope is that they keep talking to me and telling me what's going on in their lives. If they stopped talking to me, then I wouldn't have the slightest clue what they're facing. And then with a sigh, this parent said, Richard, the world in which our youth have to navigate today is such a different world from what the world was like when you and I were kids. The second challenge facing moms and dads involves having to constantly balance freedom and structure for our kids. Growing kids need a delicate balance of freedom and structure in order to grow to become happy and mature adults. As Christian parents, we're constantly trying to balance cultivating Christian values in our kids on the one hand, while also respecting their need to experiment with values promoted by a secular society on the other hand. Finally, Christian parents must constantly try to balance protecting their children and keeping them safe, while simultaneously allowing them to experience freedom as well as allowing them to experience some failures in life, which are required for each of us in order to grow to become responsible adults. It seems that a part of human nature is that we humans learn more from our failures than from our successes. And if we're always protected from our failures, then we can't grow as we ought to. There are no magical formulas for balancing freedom and structure. Instead, it is an ongoing series of decisions made in a fog of uncertainty and worry. Frequently, we parents just get it wrong. We tilt too far to the side of freedom and then have to overcompensate by tilting back to structure or vice versa. The third challenge which parents face is simply that we are finite, flawed human persons in our own right. Sometimes parents get angry with their children and say things to their children that should never be uttered. Sometimes we get distracted with our work or finances or life, and we aren't really paying attention when our children are sharing something vitally important to them. Despite our best efforts, sometimes we just say the wrong things to our kids at the wrong time. We parents are not perfect, just finite human persons. Perhaps as we celebrate Mother's Day today or Father's Day in 6 weeks, it is important to acknowledge how hard it is to be good parents at a time when we are confronted with these three challenges. The challenge of parenting in a digital age with social media, the challenge of achieving the proper balance between freedom and structure, and finally the challenge that each of us is simply a finite, imperfect, mistake-prone human person. What I'd like to suggest is that perhaps we've been looking at parenting the wrong way. Perhaps if we look at parenting as a form of ministry, then the challenges of parenting will not be so formidable. You see, as Christians, we believe that God creates every single person for ministry, some form of ministry. Each of us is a special constellation with a unique portfolio of gifts and talents for different types of ministry. These different ministries are quite unique, including music and teaching, justice making, hospitality, and administration, just to name a few. Some types of ministry are specialized depending upon special skills and opportunity, such as the music of ministry. Other types of are generalized types of ministries that all of us as Christians are called to practice, such as the ministry of prayer. I believe that parenting is both a specialized form of ministry and a generalized form of ministry. God calls some of us to the specialized ministry of parenting. Some of us are mothers or fathers or grandparents. It doesn't matter whether we are biological or adoptive parents. We have been entrusted with a very important ministry. And we are not alone when we engage in this ministry in parenting, because God is with us. In his second letter to the Corinthians, the Apostle Paul reflects on his own specialized ministry as a missionary. And in this reflection, he adopts the metaphor of a common, everyday clay jar. He writes, "But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be clear that this extraordinary power comes from God and does not come from us." Then Paul continues by recounting all of the hardships and challenges which he has faced as a missionary. And with each challenge that he mentions, Paul makes the observation that God's power has been sufficient to meet and overcome that challenge. Surely the same metaphor applies to the ministry of parenting. Each child is a special treasure, and we have been entrusted with the responsibility of helping that child grow into a mature, flourishing human person. What a special privilege that is. And yet, are any of us really up to the ministry of parenting? I remember when Justice, our oldest child, was born, the nurse handed him to me, and I took him in my arms and looked down at this perfect little baby boy. And there was just this rush of emotion as I thought to myself, I am so not ready to be a father. I am completely unprepared and inadequate for this child. Isn't that a common emotion for all you mothers and fathers? God has given us this treasure, and all we have to put it in is this everyday clay jar of our own lives. But here's the good news. We are not alone in parenting our children. As Paul says, this extraordinary power belongs to God and not to us. When we take on this ministry of parenting, we are weak and flawed and we make mistakes. Still, God is present, working with us in the ministry of parenting. And God's power is sufficient to help us meet each and every challenge which our children present to us. God can take our flawed efforts and redeem them. When my daughter Eden was a teenager, we had some rough times in our father and daughter relationship. We got into some horrific arguments. And yet through it all, God was present in our relationship, healing it, redeeming it, and ultimately guiding us through to the other side when she became an adult. We are not alone in this ministry of parenting. God is with us. As Paul says, we have this treasure in clay jars to remind us that the extraordinary power comes from God and not from us. And still, no one or two people can ever responsibly parent a child by themselves. It takes a team. Literally a cast of thousands to grow a child. It takes a lot of help from family, friends, teachers, choir directors, Sunday school teachers, youth counselors, scout leaders, 4-H leaders, even the occasional stranger. We cannot do it alone. That's why I believe that God calls each and every one of us to a more generalized ministry of parenting. It doesn't matter whether we are biological father or mother. Each of us is called by God to the general ministry of helping parents. Each of us is called to be like a mother or like a father to the children around us. When I was growing up and in grade school, in the house beside me there was an older retired gentleman and his middle-aged daughter who had never married. They were the Coopers. And I loved the Coopers. Sometimes they would babysit when my parents went out for the evening. I used to love going over to see Miss Cooper after school. She would always have homemade cookies, and we would sit at her kitchen table, and I would tell her about my day in school. She was always interested in what I was doing and what I was thinking. Miss Cooper was always encouraging and affirming. And although she herself was never a biological mother, I am a better, more loving person today because Miss Cooper was like a second mother to me when I was growing up. As a gathered community of faith here at Christ United Methodist Church, we must all commit ourselves to this generalized ministry of being like mothers and fathers to the children in our midst. We must become a community of faith which cherishes our children and helps their parents. In my own youth, in my own growth as a kid, I benefited from so many people in my church, in my community of faith, who nurtured me and strengthened me and guided me and sometimes corrected me when I needed it. When I was in high school, I benefited from this exceptionally strong youth group that our church had. It was a tremendous youth group. And it was sponsored by 3 married couples, all in their late 20s. None of the couples had any children. Neither did they have nieces or nephews or other family relatives in the youth group. They had no vested interest in the youth of the church. And yet they volunteered 20 or more hours each month to serve as youth group counselors simply because they were committed to supporting the youth and being like a second mother or a second father to the members of that group. I believe that supporting our mothers and our fathers is so important that everyone here at Christ United Methodist Church must be engaged in some way in our children's and youth ministries. For some of us, that engagement may be teaching Sunday school or serving on the advisory committee for Chris Reese, our youth pastor. For others, that engagement may be teaching or helping out with our fine arts camp or with the Vacation Bible School. For others, that engagement may be baking cookies for our youth or helping with the Halloween party or the Easter egg hunt. But whatever the task, regardless of the level of that task, if you really care about the future of this congregation, then you will find some way to help out with our children and youth ministries at least once each year. Mother's Day was made for women like my mother. She was a very special person. She made so many sacrifices for me, my sister, and my crazy brother. She encouraged me and helped me to develop far more self-confidence than she herself ever had. She was not perfect, but she was a great mom. I am glad for a special day like Mother's Day when I can remember and celebrate her, my mother, and what she's done for me. When I can celebrate Mother's Day with my wife, LaGreer, and think about our 2 children. Yet the best Mother's Day that I could ever give, the best Mother's Day present that I could ever give to my mom, is to be a good father to my 2 children and also to be committed to this generalized ministry of parenting by helping and supporting other parents, especially in this church, as they face the challenges of being a good parent and of raising good children. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Amen.